Thank you so much for staying with us. I've had a wild morning, and I've had great guests, and I've got more great guests. I've got Paula Zahn. She's on the case with Paula Zahn, and we're going to talk about her latest case, probably. Paula, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. The wild ride continues.
I love what you're doing. I really do, because, you know, you're in a world that's filled with so many voices like I am, and it's hard to be a voice of reason, and you're a voice of reason.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. These cases that we look at are often filled, as you know, with contradictory information and really interesting characters, always warring prosecutors and defense attorneys, and the stories are just very, very compelling, and they require a tremendous amount of research and thought, and I'm loving the process of really digging deep on each of these individual stories.
Well, you told me in a previous interview you're going back to your journalistic roots. We know you're an award-winning journalist, and we know you've got passion, and you've been in this for decades. How does it feel to do what you really love?
You know, it's great, because for the first time in my career, I'm not tethered to an anchor desk, so I really am able to spend a lot of time on these stories and not just parachute in and out of them as I used to do. You know, I'm not disparaging the quality of the reporting I used to do, but, you know, there were time constraints. You had to be back every night, you know, to the anchor desk or back to the morning show at CBS or whatever I was doing at the time. And intellectually, I'm finding these stories very stimulating. I spend most of my time researching stories before I go into interviews. And, you know, as you know, I'm doing 90% of the interviews in the show, not only with police officers and family members, but sometimes the killer themselves. And these interviews require a tremendous amount of diligence. We're searching for the truth. And as you know, it's very, very easy to evade the truth sometimes.
It is. Now, crimes are getting, and I'm sure it's been like this, but the crimes are so horrific. I mean,
they're unimagiable. I mean, you just can't believe that a human being would do what they do to another human being. And it's a very sad reflection of where we are, although some people tell me, you know, let's remember what happened thousands of years ago. We just have an amazing capacity to hurt each other.
When these crimes are being told, how does this affect your soul? This is what I see at home. You know.
Oh, boy. You know, it's hard. You know, as reporters, we're supposed to always be very objective about what we're reporting. But when you're sitting down with a family member and they tell you about a loss of a loved one, and sometimes you don't think about the ripple effect of one individual loss in a family and how it shatters so many lives. And when you sit with parents who are still grieving the loss of a child after 20 years, and they share that grief very openly with you and their pain, there are times when I get up from the interview and cry, as do my producers. I mean, to hear what these families have been through is heartbreaking.
It is. Now, as you do your show, tell me, what is the takeaway for us as the audience, rather than taking this information, talking about it at cocktail parties and beach parties and things? What is the takeaway for us? You
know, I think there are a number of things. First of all, we know the legal system isn't always fair, and that's not to denigrate all the hardworking people in America that dispense justice, but we know that witnesses lie. We know that sometimes district attorneys are running for higher office, will ultimately run for higher office, and they're under pressure to solve a crime. We've had situations where sheriff's deputies have actually written confessions or statements out for someone who was potentially facing a federal drug possession charge. And if they blame someone for the killing and that helps solve the case, you know, they don't get you know, the long sentence. Those are aberrations in the legal system, but this stuff does happen. So I think we're shining a light on some of the inequities in the justice system. And then, just as importantly, I think when these family members come on the air to share their stories, they are raising red flags for the rest of us out there who have loved ones who are vulnerable. And many of our victims are young women who are leaving college and starting new lives in cities, and maybe aren't as careful as they should be. And I think each time at the end of one of these stories, you sort of, want to grab your children and say, you know what, you're not going to get into a car alone, and you're not going to drive alone. And if you do have to drive home from school, do not stop at a convenience store. I think they help raise our awareness of just how vulnerable any of us could be when we're seeing traveling solo. And the cases go far beyond that. But it's a healthy reminder of just how vigilant we all need to be in protecting each other.
I thank you for saying that, because it seems like law enforcement is so afraid to say what you just said. I ask them all the time, what's the takeaway? Oh, you need to be a little more careful, buckle your seatbelt. But someone needs to tell us that we need to watch our children closer. We need to be more vigilant about them. We need to say no when we need to say no.
And you know what? When you're in a place and you've stopped at a stop sign and someone's asking for directions, be aware of your surroundings. See if anybody else is around. That person can easily jump in your car. I don't want to make people paranoid, but some of our cases involve somebody simply stopping at a four-way stop and a young girl alone. These kids have to be very, very vigilant, as we all do in our lives.
That's why we love investigation. We love, On the Case with Paula Zahn, because you're a voice of reason.
Tell
me when we can watch your new season. You got a new season, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. Kicks off June 3rd, 10 p.m. in most markets Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Central Time. And we have a really interesting, fascinating group of stories. And I hope people will tune in again this season as they have in previous seasons.
Well, we think you're interesting and fascinating. You're just reason enough to watch On the Case with Paula Zahn.
Thank you,
Paula.
I really appreciate that.